All right, I took about 5 minutes to just kind of look at the image. This is a black and white, not a very good print. I'm looking at the overall shape of the head, and it has kind of a triangular shape to it. It's wide here, and it goes down. She has kind of a heart-shaped chin and face. So that's kind of my overall shape that I want to think about. If I get that right, it'll look more like her. And in working in the same style that Sargent worked, I won't be drawing a really in-depth drawing. I'll just be doing a sketch, trying to get my proportions proper, my proportions right, and then I'll be wiping it off just so that I have sort of a shadow of the drawing left to paint into. I've already looked at the head, and it depends on whether you start from the bottom of the bow. I believe the top of her head runs right around through here. So from the top of her head to her chin, and from her chin to almost the bottom of the painting is 2 heads tall. From the top of her head to her hairline where her bangs start is 1 proportion. From her bangs to where I think her eyebrows are, it's hard to see, but it looks like they're about right here, just below the bangs, or just right at the edge of the bangs. From the bangs to the bottom of the nose, from the bottom of the nose to the chin. These are the 3 areas I'm most concerned with, particularly these 2, because if these are not right, we will have a really difficult time getting this to look like her. So even though we're not going to do a real detailed drawing, I'm still concerned with getting the proportions right. So let's compare those 2. From her nose to her chin is the same as from her eyebrows to the bottom of her nose. So I know that these 2 are equal. From her eyebrows to the part in her bangs is bigger, about 1/4 bigger. From her chin to her bottom of nose to brows, hairline to top of head, all 3 of these are equal, and this one is a little bit bigger. So when I come over here on my paper, I want to make a mark. I want to be able to divide this into 2 heads with a little bit left over at the bottom. So I'm going to make a guess first. So I would be able to fit the whole painting on here with these 2 heads. I've still got a little bit of room up here for the bow. And if I wanted to move down just a little, I could do that. So I've had several questions lately about how do you change from a small image to a larger image. And it's the same thing. You want to make sure that you know where the top, let's say the bow's going to be here, top of the head here. And then I have to divide this segment into 2 equal parts to make sure I can fit the head. So I'm going to guess. And that's about right. I could make it a tiny bit bigger, and I'd like to because it's harder to make small features. So yeah, that's 2 heads tall. The next thing I want to do is divide this head into the right proportions. So I'm going to make a stab at it. I'm going to say there, this one's a little longer, and these 2 should be equal. So let's check it. I don't think it's right. Chin to bottom of nose to eyebrows, eyebrows to hairline. So no, I don't have it right, so I need to erase. And let me give it another stab. This one is longer. And this one should be about in half. So let's see what happens with this one. Here to here and here to here should be the same. This one should be longer, and that one should be the same. So see, I don't have enough room up here. So again, I want to do this kind of on purpose to show you that we're really just moving these marks to make sure. Usually I'm not too concerned with how thick the hair is up here. I'm mostly concerned with the face, and then I add the hair later. But because I have a small canvas here, I want to make sure that it's right. So let's make this a little bigger. Let's make these a little smaller than I previously had them. Let's see how close we are now. These should be the same. That has to go up just a tad. And then those are the same. So now we've got it. That one needs to go up just a tad. Let's double check it. I did prepare this surface with Zinsser, and I put a little bit of cerulean blue and raw sienna acrylic paint in it to get that kind of a cool tone that I believe Kinsler uses, and I know Sargent uses a kind of a gray tone on his. We're not really 100% sure, I don't think. But I wanted something that wasn't just pure white. So see, this is kind of tedious. It's taken me a few minutes to measure it. But again, getting a likeness has more to do with this right here than anything else. So, and this is again not a way that Sargent worked or taught. This is a way Daniel Green taught. But this is what I have to do, even if I'm doing a quick rough in. The other thing I noted was from the bangs or the hairline where the bangs begin to the chin is the same as the widest part of her hair. So I can come over here and I can give myself, and that's right straight above her eyebrow line. Those two are the same. So I can go ahead and make a note of that. It's bigger over here. So right above her hairline, this is the widest part of her head. So I've given myself a little map of where I'm going. So now I just want to start doing kind of a quick gesture drawing, because I believe that's more of the way that Sargent worked, with quick, bold strokes, it said, and he would kind of not really do any details, but he was just really trying to get the feeling of the head. And again, if I did sort of a gesture, I feel like that this is it almost is not an alien head, but it's more of a triangular shape of a head. So I feel like that captures maybe a little bit of the overall shape of her head. Of course, she's got this hair, but you can see a lot better on this right side. Her neck. Going to come right along in here. A couple of other things I can check is how wide is her face compared to her. And it's the same, but right across her eyes as it is from her eyebrows to her chin. So see, I can come over here quickly and make a note of where her face should be. And even if I erase all this, I'll still be able to find my lines of demarcation here when I start painting, and I'll be able to see where things go. Like last week, we looked at plumb lines, and we know that this side of I don't have any eyes yet in here. So I know her brows are here. And typically, the width of an eye is the same as the height from the brow down to the under eye socket, because that's a big eyeball. So I can come in here and I can check she's got exactly one eye in between the two, and you can fit one eye over here. So I could divide this and start putting about where I think the eyes go. This side will be a little bit shorter because it's foreshortened. So I could go ahead and draw a little bit of what I think are her eyes. No real detail here. I'm having to make myself not do detail, which is really, really difficult. Because you know me, I want to go ahead and do detail right from the get-go. But we really are just trying to get the form, the shape of the head and the form. She's got a really strong shadow, and I'm not sure how Sargent did it, but Daniel Green always drew the shapes of the shadows, and that was real helpful in getting a likeness. Her lips, the bottom lip, maybe that's too close, so I can see that there's too much room here. So, bottom of her nose. Sometimes the charcoal doesn't want to work. Top of the lip. Opening of the mouth. She has pretty little full lips. Bottom lip. Shadow under the bottom lip. And the little chin, the little circle of her chin down here. I can check her sides of her mouth. She has a pretty narrow little mouth. They come straight down from just inside of her iris. And then I can check the width of the mouth to see what it corresponds to, and it is the same as from the eye to where the shadow stops. So that's about right. So really, what's going to make this look like her is not these features so much as it is the hair, the shape of her head. Again, I'm probably drawing way too much, but it's part of my nature to do that. And I'm going to make myself wipe most of it out. Again, which is going to be hard to do. I can draw the shapes of the shadows here with this hair. I'm going to double check my measurements again. Make sure I don't get too far off. So from here to here should be the same as nose to chin, nose to eyebrows, and this one is a little bit longer. So, top of the bow. Roll of the hair. Roll of the hair. And it's pretty easy to see these dark shadow shapes. Now, I'm not sure why, but I believe that Sargent would draw and then he would wipe it off to keep himself from doing the coloring book thing, where he just filled in all the lines. I don't know that, but I would imagine, because we all have a tendency to do that, and we're working so carefully when we do, that it's not to our benefit. Usually we end up with a really contrived painting when we do that. Haven't done anything yet with her. I know her face is this wide, and let me check that again. So through the eyes is the same as from the brows to the chin. Through the eyes is the same as the brows to the chin. Yep, so that's still accurate. A little piece of shadow here, and then the hair goes in here. We see a little bit of her ear right along the bottom of her nose. We see more of this side of the face, a little bit more than we do that side. You do see a little indication of an ear over there, but you can't really tell. You don't really see the earlobe. A little bit lower. Her jawline drops down a bit. And then her chin is real distinctive as well. Shadow shape under her chin. Her neck comes right up straight through her face. And then that seems too narrow, but we can check the width of her neck and see what that corresponds to. And it's from her eyebrows to her top lip. So that's about right. It seems really thin. This is all shadow shape in here. This is all shadow shape. Her chin is not chubby right there. It goes, let's see, moving around the perimeter of the face. Make yourself really slow down and look at all these angles, matching angles. That one goes almost straight down, maybe a little too narrow. The widest point is right here, and then it starts to come in just over from the lip. So something seems off. So again, I can hardly help myself. I've got to do a little bit of detail, but I am going to make myself erase it. So I do want to try this method of working with just the big simple shapes. Her hair, we could measure how long her hair is from just right across from her eyebrow down to the end of her hair. And it's the same as chin to almost the top of her head. So eyebrow to here, so that's about right. And you can just see some little abstract shapes down here for hair. See this kind of in a triangular shape. And you do see evidence of hair over here, even though it's lost in the shadow. So I think there's a few telltale things here that will make this look like her. These deep shadows around the eyes. Her eyes are set in pretty deep and they're very shadowed. Shadowed here. Her face is rather long. Not chubby at all. All right. The other thing I can check really quickly is from her chin to where her blouse ends. And if you, again, hold your plumb line up, you see that it comes right along through here. Not sure how far down it goes, but we can measure from her chin to where the blouse ends and see what that's the same as. And it's the same as her hairline to almost the bottom of her eye. Okay, so it's about right there is how far the blouse goes. Really easy to misjudge these kinds of things. So it's better to measure and be sure. Her bow is all the way over here. And these sailor stripes are what's so distinctive to make you recognize this painting. You want to go ahead and put those in. A lot of darks up here. So even if you want to go ahead and do that now so that when you get ready to paint, you have a good feel for your values. All right, I picked up a tortillon and I wanted to go ahead and mass a little bit of these shadow shapes in and try to draw a little bit with this blender. Her cheek looks so chipmunky there. It just doesn't feel right to me at all. I don't have a feeling of her. And I'm kind of cheating a little bit because if I mush this in a little, when I wipe it down, I won't lose so much of my drawing. Haha. I've been wanting to work like this and see how it is to just try to carve out a likeness, much like a sculptor carves a head out of clay without a real strong foundation underneath. Now, if you feel like, if you try to draw this and you struggle with it, and you want to just practice the painting techniques of Sargent, you may want to think about transferring it and then just doing, not getting too caught up in the drawing of it, although that's very important. But if you haven't been doing a lot of portraits and it overwhelms you, then just trace it off and we'll work on the painting techniques together. If you can take away one thing from a master study, one or two major things that you pick up and you can do better in your next painting, and they affect you in your next painting, then I think you've been successful. I think it's really key not to set yourself up to have some kind of major masterpiece going here It is easier to work from somebody else's work because they've done all the hard work for you. But be easy on yourself. Don't expect yourself to do a masterpiece on your first portrait, or your second, or your third. Give yourself room. All right, so remember, again, not drawing anything, but remember when we do the lessons on the lips, there's 2 ovals on this bottom lip, and there's 2 ovals on the top with a little heart in the middle. And she does have pretty full little lips. They're pretty distinctive. This shadow shape on her cheek is pretty important. And again, this is probably way more than Sargent or Kinsler or any of those guys would do. But I want to help you guys to get something on here too that is workable, so that we're not... I did forget this shadow shape under the chin, which is important. Her chin almost melts into that shadow shape, and you can see the bend of her neck right about here. Remember that charcoal will just melt into your paint, so you don't have to worry too much unless you just have some really thick areas that you're going to try to go over with light paint. Most of this is going to be dark, so the dark areas that I've masked in are going to have dark paint, so it'll just melt right into that. All right, so if I'm fairly satisfied that this is something like her, that I know the proportions are right because I remeasured and remeasured. I'm just going to take a rag and kind of knock it down so that I won't be tempted to try to color that in. I've got the colors that Sargent used along with my own. This first row here is my usual colors. And so I just came back along, and this second row, minus these, is our Sargent colors. At least some Sargent colors. He used quite a few. This is ivory black, titanium white, raw sienna, yellow ochre, vermilion, and Prussian blue. I squeezed out some Terra Rosa, which I believe is almost the same as English red. So English red was in his arsenal of colors. So the main thing, and I have the tubes here that I've used, they're mostly Grumbacher. There's some Winsor Newton. And I suggest that you clean your palette off. Make sure that you have a good mixing space. This is a rather small space, but it'll do. And I'm going to go ahead and mix up close to what I think the background and the hair colors will be. I don't typically like to use pure black, but since that was Sargent's color, and one of the things in his notes, in the notes about Sargent, was to be not be frugal with your paint, but to mix nice deep piles of color. So because that background looks rather cool, I'm going to use some Prussian blue in with the black, typically in pastel, and I'm pretty sure it's the same with oil. Black is not a real completely covering color. It's weak. It's somewhat transparent. So if you mix another color with it, that helps. Sometimes to cool it off, you use blue. To warm it up, you can use raw umber. So there may be some areas as I paint into it. If we could see this real painting, we'd probably see some different things in it. I am going to make one side over here that's warmer. Ivory black's pretty cool. It's on its own, I think. It's to me, it has a kind of a bluish tint, but that depends on what brand you use. So that's pretty much the background color. I may use a little medium with that just to get it to spread better. Sometimes you can use a telephone book to clean your palette knife off, and I do like to use a palette knife so that all my paint does not end up in the ferrule of the brush. and I have none on the palette. And I can also squeeze it back into a little pile here. This is a little bigger than I usually use. There's a little bit smaller one that I like. Now on the hair color, there's 3 basic colors. And the darkest dark, I'm going to say, is English red. Doesn't really feel orange, but get some of that out. With some Prussian blue in it. Let's see what happens. And I like, when I'm mixing color, I like to try a little out to the side before I mix the whole batch up. That's pretty dark. Actually, that would have worked okay for your background color as well. The Prussian blue mixed with the Indian red, or Terra Rosa rather. So that's pretty dark. I think I'll wipe my palette knife off and just come over here and mix in, warm that up just a little. If I hold my palette knife up, that's pretty close to the darkest dark I see on the hair. Then for the middle tone, and I do see it kind of orangey in some places, so I see a little bit of that. If you don't have English red, you can just mix yourself a little bit of an orange with your vermilion and your yellow ochre, and then put a speck of blue in it, and you'll get a nice English red color. Let me do that for you right now in case you don't have English red. English red is also really close to burnt sienna. So let's see what happens when we mix it up here. See if we can get something close to this. See, already, it's pretty close. And if we just put a speck of, I sound like Bob Ross, don't I? We put a little speck of, ooh, that Prussian blue is really super strong. So we only needed a speck of that. Let's go back over here and mix the vermilion again with yellow ochre. My tube of vermilion broke, so that's why I have so much out on the palette. So there we go. That's a nice color. It's getting pretty close to that. But there, that's what we were aiming for, and I kind of like that better. So anyway, I have both of those to choose from. Now the next color in the hair is leaning more yellow, so I'm going to grab some raw sienna, which is a little darker than the yellow ochre. There's probably places where you'll just see pure raw sienna. Maybe it has a little bit of white in it. See what happens. Yep. And I wonder what happens if we just do, because this is your experimentation, if we just do raw sienna with a little bit of blue in it. And remember, this Prussian is potent, just a tiny bit. So it's kind of going greenish on us a little. I don't know that I'd go that direction necessarily. I kind of like the more orange tones, but that's not bad. We also know that, I forgot to squeeze this out, but we also know that Sargent used Naples yellow. Pretty color. Just got a little bit more pigment to it than when you mix white in with this other yellow. It's a little bit brighter. It's got a kind of an orangey tone to it. And Grumbacher's a good brand, so that would be an okay thing for you to use. There we go. I'm finally getting it out of the tube. Sometimes I think you have to work the tube a little bit. All right. So we've got a pretty good range here, and the opposite on the color wheel of yellow is purple. So there's probably an opportunity for us to put a little purple in. These lighter tones. I'm going to go this way with the raw sienna. and white. And then to make a little bit of purple, I'm going to use the Prussian. Whoops, I don't want that. We're going to go back to the colors that we've already got. We're going to use vermilion or cad red, if that's what you've got, and a little bit of Prussian to make a purple. And sometimes when you mix purple, it's hard to tell what the hue is till you pull it out with some white. But see, that's mostly red. Put more blue in it to get a truer purple. There we go. So that mixed in with this purple here. I mean, this yellow here, sorry. Gives you kind of an interesting grayed color. We might find that in the hair somewhere. So this is what I like to do. I don't think Sargent painted this way because Kinsler and Shane Neal will mix as they go. I like to have some pools of color to draw from instead of one big sea of color that constantly changes. It's just easier on my brain if I can keep it separated and have a little dress rehearsal. I feel more confident. I think you might learn more about color if you just mix as you go, but I had trouble with that, and I needed to see what I had done. Sometimes if I'm not sure what I mixed, I'll put a little color note. This pure color is still here, so I can see that's raw sienna, and I could put a little purple down here to show that I added purple in that. I could put a little blue next to this to show that I added blue. And I could put yellow ochre and vermilion here, little dots of it, just to give myself a little map to tell me how I got those colors. The problem is when you go back to paint sometimes after everything's dried, you don't have any idea what you mixed. And if you limit your palette, and again, it's black, ivory black, white, raw sienna, yellow ochre, vermilion. I did squeeze out the English red or Terra Rosa and Prussian blue. These other colors are my previous colors that I used on another painting. So this is my basic place that I'm going to start today. So if you want to take a few minutes to mix these colors up, and then we'll start laying in the first layer of background in here. All right, I've got a variety of brushes, filbert brushes here. These are all ivory filberts, synthetic brushes from Rosemary. Some of them are getting a little worse for wear. I'll probably use this one, which is the number 6 Rosemary filbert. I usually swish my brushes off in some turp before I start because I use a little bit of brush cleaner in them sometimes, the goop. And I have a white cloth that I'm also using, a cotton cloth. So I wet my brush really good, and I'm going to start with the background color and the color we mixed up with the ivory black and a little bit of Prussian blue in it. And because it feels kind of stiff, even though Prussian blue is a thin, transparent color, it's going on kind of stiff. So I know Sargent doesn't use any medium, but I'm going to put a tiny bit of walnut alkyd on my brush just so the paint will move around a little better. And I'm looking at the painting, my subject, as I lay this in, because I'm not going to just put it anywhere. And you see how this side is warmer because it's got that English red mixed in it. This side is mostly Prussian blue and black, which is very transparent. Now the other thing that I want to guard against is my usual way of painting right up to the line. Sargent totally worked in over his drawing lines in a very much of an overlapping method. So I'm getting rather thin with the paint, and that's okay. This first layer can go on thin. Just want to get some of this dark messed in. Actually, I'm leaning more towards this English red color because the black is so cold and it doesn't cover well. It gets warmer as it gets closer to her body. This area feels a lot warmer than out here. When I watched Dan Gerhardt's demonstrate, he talked a lot about that, and it made sense to me that as you get closer to the skin and the body that the temperature warms up. I don't know if that's actually true with color, but I'm seeing it warmer in here. Maybe not this warm. I might have overshot it a little. The little dress she's wearing, or blouse, is really cool. I'm going to go ahead and lace some of that in. And I can already tell that I'm going to have to really fog this because I'm having a tendency to color in the lines. So let me just make sure I don't do that too much. It feels cooler on this side of her neck. If you've been in my class very long, you've watched Helen Van White videos, and you've watched her usually start with the face and the head, and that might be what we should have started with, but we didn't. So we're doing the background first. Normally she makes the head much bigger than she intends it to finally be, and then she carves that down. So I've taken about 4 minutes so far to get this background in, and I'm not too worried about it being perfect. This Stillman Burn sketchbook is pretty absorbent, and most of the time, unless you're working on a really nice surface, it's going to absorb a lot of your oil out, and it's not going to move very good for you. So a little medium helps it move better. This really cool tone down here for her blouse. And it's just almost pure black down here. I'm just going to go ahead and get that in. All right, my video stopped. So I reset it, and I did start blocking in the hair some. I'm trying to squint when I do this so that I'm not looking at any of the details right now. I just want to get a feeling of what that hair looks like, the shapes, the darks, mediums, and lights. And I'm thinking about the head being a sphere as I'm working around it. It looks really not beautiful at this point. And I really am thinking I should have started with the skin tones. But when I was reading in Sargent's notes, it said he would block in the background and the hair at some point. So I'm thinking maybe he did it several different ways. So we'll just go with it since I've already started and see where we go with it. I do want to come back in around this hair a little and think about the shapes of it. And you see that we'll be able to go over and over. But I do like to work on the hair and the background at the same time, because then you can soften your edges and come back in here and draw with paint. Because the whole goal of this is to get out of our pencil, nitpicky, filling in the lines and get more painterly. And think about the way, and see I've moved to this size 3, size 2 filbert, which probably is a no-no. but I wanted to get in here and redraw some of these shapes that I was having trouble with. All the way up to here it's dark. Now, what I'm going to want to do is keep all the edges around the face, since I don't have any skin in yet. I want to keep all these edges really soft and blurred so that when I do work back in with the skin tones, I don't have any hard edge there, that I can come back in here and paint as if it were wet into wet. And I would like to go ahead and... All right, so I'm going to go back with just a little bit more dark. I don't think I have it dark enough. A couple of places. And take a soft brush and comb it down a little bit, just so it's not so... I've got a mop. I'm just going to take it and knock it down a little so it's not so cut out. I'm going to wipe that on my rag. I really just kind of want this to be a blur tonight. No real detail in it. She's got some horns going on here. Also, I would like to put a little bit of that bow and give an idea of where that's going to eventually go, even though it will be changed and refined. Just get a place for it. Again, I want everything to be a blur today. I don't want it to be pasted on. So I've told you all that when I took Casey Ball's workshop, and I got this blonde I'd been working on for about an hour and a half. He came and took a soft mongoose brush and just blurred it. And we were working on a really nice surface, some kind of a Creative Mark or Edge Pro board that was lead primed. So the paint moved around really nice. This is really absorbent. So it's another animal. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to mix up some skin tones and let you see how I mix those, and then we'll lay in a little bit of skin tone. Okay, so I'm going to leave my hair and background colors, and I'm going to mix up some skin tones down here on the bottom of my palette. These are going to be much lighter, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself some white. And all skin falls in the red and yellow family. So I'll use raw sienna and vermilion to make the first pile, or maybe let's try yellow ochre and vermilion. So as you're mixing skin tones, either it's going to be too red or too yellow. And this is pretty red. So I'm going to pull out some more yellow ochre. And I definitely see that. So just right off the bat, in about 30 seconds, you have a basic pool of skin tone colors. Now, you've got your lit part of the face, but you don't have your shadows. So I'm going to go back up here with the yellow ochre and the viridian, or the vermilion. And I'm going to mix up another form of my English red. We're going to put a little bit of blue with it. Oops, a little bit of blue, what I said, not a lot. Goodness. Remember that, how potent that Prussian is. Goodness, that's not what I wanted at all. I'm gonna put it up here with the background color. Get some more vermilion and yellow ochre. There we go. Do I see that anywhere at all on her? Not really. It's leaning more toward, well, let's see what happens when we pull it down with some white. Maybe, yeah, there we go. Let's try a little bit more blue in it. See what happens. The shadow tone under her chin. And I have two different versions of this portrait. And that's got more Prussian blue in it. This one has more of the orange in it. So those may work pretty well for the shadow tones under her chin, down the ridge of her nose, under her upper lip, and she's got some really light areas on her face. So let's go ahead and bring that yellow, ochre, and white down. I think we've got everything we need right there. All right, I want to go back in here and put a little bit of an idea of where these stripes are going to go on her shirt. Just a masked idea. I'm using a little bit. I had some of the background color, and I just put white in it. Okay, I've had a chance to step back and look at it from a distance, which is what Sargent advises and did often. He wore a path out in his studio, walking back and forth. So I want to squint and see if I've prepared a place for the next time I come back in here to work, to see if everything is, through the squint, is close to the right shape. And remember, her head was really like a big triangle. So I want to reproduce that. I also want to prepare the canvas for next time by making everything blurry and soft. Now I'm using a mongoose, roseberry mongoose brush, which is one of the first ones. It's the original mongoose hair. And it's just like nothing else. I don't know how to describe it, but it's really wonderful. It's easy to just go over this and just kind of blur everything and soften it out. I'm going to wipe it periodically so that I'm not dragging paint everywhere, but I just want to have a nice soft blur so that if I squint, I see everything through the squint. I do have another area here that I'd like to have a little bit more of an angle on, because her head goes pretty distinctively like this. That shape is pretty distinctive. Even though that's not exactly right, when I look through the squint, that does give me that shape that I'm looking for. And I want all these hard edges right here. This hard edge, that needs to go away. That needs to be really soft. If you let this paint dry like this, it's a whole lot harder to get things to work next time. When you come back and try to work back into the wet paint or the dry paint, you almost have to repaint the whole thing again to get any kind of a progress. So again, I want to make everything just a blur. This here needs to be a blur, and the only time to do this is when it's wet. So that's why I think just today, getting this thing drawn and getting as much as we can in here. My phone ran out of memory, so I had to stop, and while I was waiting for files to transfer, I went ahead and masked in the area where these stripes should go. That's not how they'll look, but it's close to how they'll look. And I really do just want this to be as if you were looking at the painting through without your glasses on. I'd like for it to just be a soft mush. The next time we paint on it, it'll be so much more fun to work into this and to develop the details more. So I'm mushing it a lot. This is going against my nature to do this. Just barely flicking over the top of it. So that my paint's not too gobbed up. I kind of liked it blocky like that. I kind of wanted to leave it like that. And see how if you don't clean your brush, I'm moving this purple gray around into my clean areas. So I'll have to clean those up tomorrow or next week when we work on it again. I want to deposit a little bit more flesh tone up here because this is a really clean area around her eye. It's a pretty orangey, clean tone that's bright, and I don't have that anymore. I lost it. I have some of Shane's demonstrations that I've done with him through the years, and I think I'll pull those out so I can show you this early stage of how his paintings look. Again, he's tried to work like Kinsler in the tradition of Sargent, and he's tried to do a lot of what Sargent does. So I hope you're not too creeped out by the dark holes for eyes at this point. I'm looking again at these shadow shapes. Because that's really what you see. And there are painters who will do the 5 shadow shapes, which are under the eye socket, under the nose, under the lip, upper lip, under the bottom lip, and under the chin. And just move down and focus on what those shadow shapes look like. And not really worry about any feature. So that's probably a good exercise for us right now, to just think about those shadow shapes. I'm picking up a little bit of the dark again, just to remind myself of how dark that'll eventually be. And here, and up here. So since I've added more paint, I'm going to grab my mongoose one more time. I don't want any hard ridges to paint back into. I want things to be soft. So I don't know if I have a feeling of the roundness of this head yet. I want to think about it being a lump of clay. And I see the front and the side and this side. I don't know yet. I think it takes quite a bit of paint to get that point to that point. But I think I'm going to stop there. And it's hard to put your brush down. I want to keep working. And it is nicer to work when it's wet. There's just nothing like wet and wet. See, I can't do it. Some of this dark comes in under her chin right there. And then there's some reddish color up here, where maybe an ear, part of her ear or something is. Can't stop myself. Somebody's going to have to take the brush out of my hand. Isn't that what they say? It takes two people to paint a painting. One to hold the brush and the other to take it out of your hand. Blur, blur, blur. Whatever I did, I want to go back in there and just kind of blur it back out. Skin doesn't have any hard edges on it. Okay, here's what my palette looked like after I finished working. You can see I didn't really use a lot of colors. The background colors and the skin tone colors, and that's all I used. And go ahead and put your paints in a baggie or a basket so that you'll remember what colors you used throughout the whole project.